Welcome to the Content 10X Podcast, the show where content creators learn how to harness the power of content repurposing. And now, your host, Amy Woods.
Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Content 10X podcast. I'm your host, Amy Woods, and this week we're looking at case studies. We're looking at how you can create engaging client case studies that share wonderful stories to help people understand what your product and service is and hopefully want to work with you. And then when you've put that hard work into creating these great case studies, how you can repurpose your case studies into more content. So that's what I'm talking about in this week's episode. Now, client case studies are nothing new. They are one of the most tried and tested marketing tools at any business's disposal. But many people may say that they are also one of the most tired and testing and sometimes rather dull marketing tools at businesses' disposal because they've been around for a while and it's all about execution. Now, we want to make sure that your case studies are not stuffy and corporate sounding, but in fact that they are effective and compelling and will leave a long-lasting impression on anybody who reads them. In terms of what is a case study, because I'm aware not every business creates case studies, it's documenting one of your happy customers' journey. It can be anything from a short article to a multi-page report, but the basic idea is that you're sharing a story of how your product or service made life better for somebody else. And it's different to a review or a testimonial, because a review or a testimonial can feature in a case study, but a case study takes that and turns it into so much more, turns it into a story. And I shared lots of ideas on how to repurpose client testimonials and reviews in episode 97 of the Content 10X podcast. So that's content10x.com/97 or catch it on any of the podcasting apps. It's called Clever Ways to Repurpose Client Testimonials and Reviews. But this week I'm looking at case studies. So case studies give you the opportunity to share your success. And, who doesn't want to do that? As business owners, we should want to share our successes. They serve as fantastic social proof for our products and services. And, most people are going to be slightly dubious of hearing the business owner or the business themselves saying how great and wonderful they are. And they're going to pay more attention to hearing other people's experiences of how great and wonderful you are. And sometimes people just can't really understand how your service or your product works in action. So they bring everything to life. And the fact is that if you can turn your case studies into a story versus a set of facts, then facts tell, but stories sell. It's true that reviews and testimonials often convey more than facts. They're often emotive and can somewhat tell a little bit of a story. But when a case study shares more than that, when it goes into the story, then, as I said, facts tell and stories sell. Now, I want to give you an example of what I mean by the difference of a client testimonial versus a case study. So I'm going to read out a testimonial that we received from a client, and then I'm going to read how we created a case study for this client. Now, this isn't supposed to be a brag fest for Content 10X. I promise you, this really is just an example. Okay, so my client, Mike Richard, CEO of the Treasury Recruitment Company, this was his testimonial. All the team at Content 10X have been invaluable in getting our first podcast up and running. The whole process from onboarding to implementation has been seamless, and they have been there throughout to offer advice and tips along the way. Every week, the fantastic team not only professionally edit our podcast to make them sound 100 times better, but they produce the show notes, create high quality imagery and video content, post the show out to various social media channels on our behalf to ensure that we maximize our audience potential and focus our efforts on finding quality guests. Their hard work has definitely paid off, and we have received some amazing download figures and comments from both candidates and clients, so I can't thank them enough. If you're looking for a company to help you set up and consistently produce great content, then you can't go wrong with Content 10X. So there you go. That's a wonderful testimonial from Mike Richards. Really, really appreciate getting that testimonial. Now, Mike featured in my book and he featured as a case study. So this is just an example now of sharing that testimonial, I guess, that work that we've done with Mike, but at a different angle because this is more of a story for a case study. Mike became a trailblazer in his industry by establishing a successful podcast and leveraging the power of repurposing. Mike Richards is the CEO of the Treasury Recruitment Company, and thanks to a very smart decision that he made in September 2018, he's also the host of the Treasury Career Corner podcast. When I first met Mike, he was looking for the perfect way to grow his personal brand and position himself front and centre in the Treasury industry as the leading authority on recruitment. His business was established in 2002, and whilst his company became the recruitment partner of choice for many large corporate clients, Mike was aware that content marketing was something that they were not doing enough of and they were not consistent in. He wanted to change that. We guided Mike through the process of setting up and launching a weekly podcast where Mike interviews Treasury professionals from around the globe about their career. This represented a bold decision to do something different and stand out from his competitors. It was also the first podcast of its kind within his specialist area of recruitment. Repurposing was part of our strategy from day one. Unsurprisingly, many of Mike's audience were not already podcast listeners or even familiar with podcasts at all. His audience were mainly on LinkedIn, so repurposing podcast content onto LinkedIn was essential. We work with Mike to repurpose his podcast into engaging visual content, audiograms and video teasers, short video trailers, and written show notes on his website, LinkedIn, and Twitter. We ensured his podcast was available on all the main podcast apps, and a podcast video trailer goes onto YouTube and LinkedIn. His podcast also features in his newsletter to his subscribers. We've also made the most of video content and repurposed that into podcast episodes, including video footage from events. Through repurposing, content never dries up on the social media platforms, and fresh, new content gets posted every week to his website, which is great for SEO. It's fair to say that the Treasury Career Corner has been a huge hit. This one-of-a-kind podcast created a buzz in the industry. All of a sudden, Mike was everywhere, talking to industry leaders, and he still is. Mike's grown a large audience of avid listeners. As download numbers have grown, so too has Mike's personal brand. Interest and awareness in Mike's business also grew. He found even if people didn't listen to the podcast, they certainly knew about it, and this has helped him build authority. A huge business advantage arising from his podcast has been Mike's ability to sit down and interview his dream clients who, in turn, through the power of relationship building and Mike's charm, have become his clients. So as you can see from both the testimonial and the case study, they showcase in different ways. His testimonial was great and it included facts and some emotion, but the case study provided more of a rounded view of what we do and how it's helped Mike, and shared more of a story of the overall journey that Mike has gone on. So you may be thinking, yep, case studies are great and it's something that we do, or it's something that we should do more of, but they can be executed really poorly. When they're executed poorly, case studies can sometimes seem too corporate and stuffy, and they can seem too focused on showing off rather than storytelling. You need to make sure that they're not too jargonistic. And if somebody is reading your case study, you don't want to be a rewrite of your sales page either. It's not about showing off and filling up the page with reasons why your product is great. It's about showing situations where your product has proven itself to solve a problem. So case studies are about specific customers, specific situations, specific problems, and specific results. So how can you make compelling case studies that are fit for repurposing? So it starts with storytelling. Think how you can turn case studies from boring factual recounting of events into a story that has the protagonist, so your client, the antagonist, so their problem, and then the villain, the extra problem, the things they've tried already that haven't worked, and then the happy ending when they started using your product. So notice how you are only really involved in one of those stages. You aren't the initial problem, you aren't the things that they solved initially, but you come in as part of the solution. So if you put in the case study onto your website, throw some pictures in there, show some videos if you can, really break things up to make it look visually appealing as well. Now, when you've created these great case studies, how are you then going to go on and repurpose them? Because you don't want to make sure that they just stick in, a certain corner of your website, or they go onto some brochures and print materials and never really move beyond those different mediums. You want them to become so much more. So firstly, share on social media. Now, yes, maybe you'll put a link to the case study out as a tweet, But you can do so much more. So you can break your case study up into separate posts for separate platforms. You can share on your LinkedIn as an article. You can use Instagram posts. You can create a bit of a story out of Instagram stories. You can create a Twitter thread as well. So think about how you can break it down and use those images that you put into your blog post and share those images as well in some of your tweets and your posts in order to create that social content around the case study. Another idea is to use video content. So you could go all in and get a properly produced video made up of this case study. So you've worked out the story and you've put pen to paper or you've typed out the story. Can you bring it to life with video? So if you have an in-house videographer, you could use them, or maybe there's an agency that you work with or freelancers that help you with video, or you could do this yourself, but work out how maybe you could create a case study video. And how you do that is really up to you. It could be you speaking to this client as well and bringing them on camera, or it could be you sharing this story by talking to camera. Now, a great example of a single individual on camera sharing really engaging case studies is Jay Baer's Talk Triggers show. So you can find that on the Convince and Convert website, convinceandconvert.com, or at the Jay Baer YouTube channel, where you can look at all of the Talk Triggers videos. Now, we created those with Jay, and he is fantastic at storytelling. Now, these are case studies of businesses that feature in his book. They're not case studies that he has worked on, but it's just a wonderful example of how you could talk to camera and share a case study and bring it to life. So do go check out Jay Baer's Talk Triggers videos. And maybe you don't even want to be in front of camera, but you could still create a video, and you could pair images with the story in text and use something like Lumen 5. So that's a great tool that you can use to create videos where you're not on camera, or you could even create audiograms as well. But think about, could you turn this case study into a video? Next up, if you're a podcaster, this is perfect content for a podcast episode. So turn those magical storytelling and writing skills into a podcast episode and share that story in audio format to your podcast listeners. And you could also make this case study part of your sales decks and sales content as well. And what I mean by that is you could be fitting it into slide share presentations that you've put together, PowerPoint presentations that you've put together, sales documents, etc., packs that you provide clients with. But think about your sales. So maybe you have a one-pager that explains each product and each service that you provide to people when they say, do you have anything that I could read over to tell me more about that product or service? Well, you could include in that kind of sale documentation this case study as well. So think about how you can weave it into your sales content. And this could also include a sales campaign by email as well. So case studies shared by email can work really, really well, which is the next item that was going to come to. Emails. So email storytelling. Look at your email marketing, look at your email funnels and see if this story could fit in perfectly as part of an email campaign. Okay, so there you have it. There's my tips and advice on creating compelling case studies and how you can then go on to repurpose those case studies as well. I'd love to hear how you get on with this. If this is something that you try, then please do hit me up on social media and let me know how you got on. I'm at Content 10X on all of the social media platforms. If you enjoyed this week's podcast episode, please do subscribe to the podcast as well and check out our archive of over 100 podcast episodes all about how you can get the most out of your content. If you're interested in our content repurposing service, a fully end-to-end repurposing service for podcasters, video creators and bloggers, then do get in touch. Head on over to content10x.com to find out more about that. And if you are a speaker as well, then do check out our Talk 10x service as well, where we will repurpose the video footage and photographs from your talks into lots and lots of social media content and more. So do check that out, Talk 10x, content10x.com/talk 10x. So all that's left to say is thank you so much for listening to this week's podcast episode, and I'll catch you in the next one.